That's it.
All right, seeing it's 8:15, I'll open the meeting and begin the roll call. Mr. Kaminsky.
Present.
Mr. Kunkel is absent. Mr. Reinert.
Here.
Mr. Sager.
Here.
Mr. Scala.
Present.
Ms. Van Bergen.
Here.
Mr. Kearns. Did I hear Mr. Kunkel?
Yeah, just
You did.
Okay, and if there a motion to accept Mr. Kunkel, Mr. Kaminsky moves, Mr. Sager seconds. Those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Okay, hi, Matt.
Thank you.
All right, do I have a motion for the minute approval? Mr. Scala moves, Mr. Kaminsky seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, do we have any public comment this morning? Yes, we do. Okay, Carol Friend.
Good morning. My name is Carol Friend. I'm a resident and homeowner in Feger subdivision. My subdivision was one of 8 out of 11 subdivisions in McHenry Township that were kicked out of the County MFT program. In March of this year, Feger's subdivision received its 2024 information packet for MFT funds. As usual, we submitted our paperwork early. In mid-May, we scheduled a meeting with a contractor to assess the necessary repairs needed to our roads. We always try to get the work done early in the season before the paving company has larger projects to do and asphalt plants close. We got a work estimate that fell within the financial guidelines we were given. Purchase authorizations for MFT funds were usually received in late May or early April. When April and May came and went, we reached out to inquire when the purchase authorizations were coming. The response was, they are coming. The MFT program begins on June 1st. All paperwork for paving done must be dated after June 1st. When the contractor called to say our roads could be repaired on June 6th, we agreed. After all, the purchase authorizations were coming and the work was done after June 1st. Then on June 11th, we were notified by the McHenry Township Road District that Feger subdivision would no longer be included in the county MFT matching funds program. Talk about being blindsided. Despite McDOT being responsible for this action, it did not notify the subdivision. That job, unfortunately, fell on the township. Was there any hint that McDOT was looking to reclassify our non-dedicated subdivision roads from private to public and therefore kicking us out of the MFP program? No. All of this was done after we had submitted the paperwork for the 2024 season, after the normal time frame for receiving authorization, and after we had proceeded with completing road repairs just like every previous year. As I mentioned previously, the time period for receiving authorization was usually late March or early April. This year, authorizations were not received until June 18th, over 2 weeks after road work can begin. Why was this being done? I have received no answer. Why the secrecy? If the county wanted to change the MFT program, why not provide the subdivision with advance notice so that we had the opportunity to clarify or refute the allegations and, if necessary, to plan accordingly? What was the point of waiting till the 2024 process had started? As I mentioned at the September 12th meeting of this committee, the subdivision appreciates the financial assistance we have received. We respectfully request the status of the roads in Feger subdivision be reevaluated and returned to their correct status as private, and that in 2025, we again are able to participate in the MFT program. Thank you for your attention and for listening.
Thank you. Okay, I didn't have anybody else check to speak, but is there anybody else who wanted to speak on this list? Okay, then I'll move on to member comments. Does anyone like to speak? Nope. All right, Matt Kunkel?
Yes, sir.
All right, move down to the routine consent agenda. Does anyone like to pull anything off? Mr. Scala?
15.
15. Okay. Mr. Sager.
I'd like to remove 5.21 and 5.23. I'm supportive of these, but I just believe we need to have a bit of a conversation with the staff.
Okay.
521 and 523, you said.
Yes. Anyone else? All right, do I have a motion then to approve the rest? Mr. Scala moves, Mr. Sager seconds. No further discussion. I'll proceed to Ms. Van Bergen.
Yes.
Mr. Scala.
Yes.
Mr. Sager.
Yes.
Mr. Reinhardt.
Yes.
Mr. Kaminsky.
Yes.
Mr. Kunkel.
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. All those, consider those all approved. Move down to 5.15. Is there a motion to approve? Mr. Sager moves. Is there a second? Ms. Van Bergen seconds. Okay, discussion, Mr. Scala.
I just removed it for my same issue with spending money on township bridges that we haven't had the discussion, so just wanted to voice that same concern and vote no.
Okay. Anyone else? All right, well, we'll proceed to vote then. Start with Mr. Scala.
No.
Mr. Sager.
Yes.
Mr. Reinhardt.
Yes.
Mr. Kaminsky.
Yes.
Mr. Kunkel.
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. Motion carries.
Yes.
Did I miss you? Hey, Tracy. Sorry.
I'm sorry, who are you?
I know.
All right, 5.21, a motion to approve. Mr. Scala moves, Mr. Sager seconds. Mr. Sager.
Yeah, I just wanted to remove this, as I indicated, so that we have a very brief commentary by staff regarding this program. We've already discussed this, and I think we know where we're going, but it would be good, I think, to have a just review before we pass this.
Sure. You guys want to- So, 21, this is the MC Ride Connect program, correct?
Yes.
So this is, just for everybody's recollection, this is the Uber subsidy program that we started during the summer. Thus far, and what you see before you today is just the appropriation for additional funds in FY25. The IGA that we have with PACE to actually operate this program continues, I think, all the way to 2033 or something like that. So it's basically, it continues until either party terminates the agreement. So you're not approving that agreement, you're simply just appropriating funds for next year. We did receive about 2 weeks worth of data from August, which is the first two. Basically, August 16th is when the program actually started, through the end of August. Do you happen to have some of those stats off the top of your head as far as how many trips that we provided?
Yeah, from August 16th to August 30th, we provided about 280 trips for 102 enrolled individuals. That invoice came out to about 3,400. That's all the data that we really have. They were able to share origin and destination, so where our riders are going and coming from. We'll have more at the next TC meeting, where we'll have another full month of data. But yeah, we just have those two. Right now we have about 140 individuals enrolled in the program. And yeah, we'll have more next time. But
Yeah, the intent is we're going to do a larger presentation on this program probably at your next meeting, because we'll have more data to share at that point. But what is interesting is the average subsidy, because again, just as a reminder, this program, the county's providing up to $16 per trip subsidy on Uber after the rider pays the first $4. What we're seeing in the data, at least for the 2 weeks that we have, is that the average subsidy is about $12.25. So some people are taking advantage of the full 16, but we have a lot of trips that are under $10 trips, which is kind of interesting. We didn't know how many short trips versus long trips we would see. When we show where people are riding, the actual heat map that we have, it's kind of interesting. You'll see a lot of trips to O'Hare. You'll see a lot of trips to a few to Naperville area, a few to the North Shore communities. So people are traveling all over this region using this program, which I think is a good sign, because they can't do that on our existing Dollar Ride program. So it is filling a gap in the little bit of data that we see. Does that answer a lot of your questions?
Absolutely, I appreciate the overview.
All right, thank you. Anybody have any questions for me? Okay, we'll proceed to vote. Ms. Von Berg.
Yes.
Mr. Scala.
Yes.
Mr. Sager.
Yes.
Mr. Reiner.
Yes.
Mr. Comiskey.
Yes.
Mr. Kunkel.
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. Motion carries. Motion for 5.23, Mr. Scala moves, Mr. Sager seconds. Discussion, Mr. Sager.
Yeah, thank you. It's kind of the same thing here. We do have a copy of the intergovernmental agreement for paratransit services before us. I just thought we'd have a brief overview by staff before we move forward.
Yeah, so this is an annual agreement we have with PACE for our Dial Ride program, the MC Ride program. Matt Kunkel, sorry you don't have a copy of this IGA in front of you. We just got this draft from PACE yesterday, so that's why you're getting it in hard copy form. However, when this goes to the Finance Committee, you'll have it in the packet at that time. Essentially, the program really remains unchanged from this year. The only thing that is changing is PACE's subsidy amount has increased. I forget what we're getting this year from PACE, but what you see in the IGA is that they've agreed to a subsidy of, make sure I get this right.
5.66847.
Correct, thank you, John. And part of that is a one-time, since the pandemic, they've issued us one-time additional subsidies. In this case, it was about $300,000, I think. The one time continues to be more than one time every year, but we're happy for any additional assistance that they're giving. The actual structure of the agreement remains the same. So PACE is contributing 50%, the county is contributing 50%, hence the ask of an appropriation amount of about $2.5 million for next year. Now, I don't think we're going to spend all that 2.5. I think that is sort of that's our cap, but I'm hopeful that costs will continue to be sort of at the level that they are today, which the program last I checked isn't going to spend our full subsidy in FY24. So that could change. Obviously, inflation could pick up again. More people could be asking for a ride, but this sort of sets the maximum level of service we'll give.
Thank you.
So other than the amount specifically, there's no substantive changes to the terms of the agreement, correct?
Well, the only thing, you'll recall 4 or 5 months ago, Jasmine brought forward a proposal to change how we issue the reduced fare rate. We are going to start asking people to, in order to get the discounted fare, the half-price fare, currently it's just self-reported. You tell us you're a senior, you get the half-price fare. You tell us you're disabled, you get the half-price fare. What we're going to start doing in 2025 is actually having people provide their RTA reduced fare or ride-free card just as proof, right? So we're sort of taking one additional step to make sure that people are in fact telling us the correct information. I don't expect it's going to change much. I mean, a lot of people already have this card, and those that don't should get the card, and it's a pretty easy process to get registered, but that really is the only substantive change that we're going to have for next year. Unless there's anything else that you can think of.
No, and that change, other regional Dial-A-Ride programs have already started using that system, so we're kind of one of the last programs to start asking our riders to provide an RTA for that reduced rate.
How many routes are there that go through McHenry County?
Routes,
What was that big one that everybody talks about, 4 something?
well, there's fixed routes that run on a schedule, and then there's the Dial-A-Ride, very different programs. McHenry County has 4 fixed routes in the county. The 550 is probably the biggest one.
550, is that what it was?
That's the one in
Somebody
Crystal
asked me
Lake,
about that.
yeah, Crystal Lake area. That's the one that runs down Randall Road, down to Elgin.
Is that where most of this money goes, Scott?
No, so in fact, none of this money goes to those services.
Okay,
This is just for the Dial-A-Ride where you have to call ahead.
just for the Dial-A-Ride?
Just for the Dial-A-Ride. Those fixed routes, just as an education, the fixed routes are entirely operated and funded by PACE. There's no county money that goes to those fixed routes
So
whatsoever.
Okay, very
Only
good.
the Dial-A-Ride do they require a local contribution from the county.
That's a staggering number for Dial-A-Ride.
Well, keep in mind, Dial-A-Ride is providing the bulk of the trips, right? Fixed routes are they're kind of the flashy thing that everybody likes to look at, and there's bus stops, and it's kind of cool, but they provide a very small number of trips in comparison to this program. We're given about 95,000 trips a year. The fixed routes, last I checked, are about 25,000 a year total altogether. So This really is the backbone of transit in McHenry County.
It's 90,000.
Yeah, about 95,000 rides this year is what we're estimating. Pre-pandemic, we were at 115, so it's.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, let's proceed to vote. Mr. Kaminsky.
Yes.
Mr. Rayner.
Yes.
Mr. Sager.
Yes.
Mr. Scala.
Yes.
Ms. Van Bergen.
Yes.
Mr. Kunkel.
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. All right, I'm gonna move down to new business, and we do have a presentation on the private road.
Old business.
Oh, old business, yeah. I don't have any new business, sorry.
I'm not sharing.
We will have, Scott's pulling up the presentation here, but the presentation will be led by Assistant County Engineer Daryl Coombs and Construction Manager Jeremy Stoll. And I will turn the floor over to those two gentlemen once Greg comes in and helps us get it up and
I don't know how to move that. Oh, here it is.
I was gonna be singing.
Just X them off.
Or we can use this. Yeah, we can. Can you click on that PowerPoint link there? Or just hover over it? And then the large screen like that? Okay, maybe that's. Now you're not. Now you're we can just run this. Okay.
floor is yours, gentlemen.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. As Joe said, my name is Daryl Koontz. I'm the Assistant County Engineer here at McHenry County DOT. I have with me Jeremy Stahl. He's our Construction Manager at the DOT. We're going to provide an overview of the use of the county's allotment of state motor fuel tax funds on private road maintenance through McHenry County Division of Transportation's private road maintenance program from the inception of the program until today. You will also hear some discussion throughout this presentation on road eligibility. You will also hear the term non-dedicated subdivision roads, which can be interchangeably used with private roads throughout this program. In this presentation, we're not going to comment on any specific cases, controversies, or issues at this time. So what is a private road? Private road is a road maintained and operated and owned by the individuals that live on it. All maintenance is the responsibility of the homeowners. No governmental body maintains the road. No public plowing happens in the wintertime. There's no public patching, tree trimming, or resurfacing happening in the summertime. You know, an NSR, in other words, the non-dedicated subdivision road, it's a technical term that's used to describe what a private road is when that road was not dedicated to a governmental body at the time of platting or construction. What is not a private road? What's not a private road is a road maintained by a governmental agency. We have several examples here. We have an interstate. We have a county route with a roundabout here. We have a state road in a more busy urban district. We have a municipal street with sidewalks and bike paths along it, and we have our township roads. These are all examples of roads that are maintained by a governmental entity and are not private roads. Why do private roads even exist? Well, prior to 1959, there was a practice of building private roads, and it was pretty common. Because private roads were narrower, and therefore less expensive for the developers, and in turn home buyers for upfront costs. These were often waterfront vacation type homes that were desirable, and cost was key in selling them. Buyers back in the day knew that in exchange for a lower priced home and lot, they would need to pay for the maintenance of the road. They acknowledged at the time that that lesser cost would then have to be borne by them in the future. However, in the long run, homeowners do spend more on their own to maintain these roads than if they were under a local agency. So after 1959's Plat Act kicked in, subdivision roads were required to be dedicated to a local agency, helping to eliminate the challenges homeowners had collectively in contracting, collecting money, and doing some of his own maintenance on their own. So Jeremy's gonna touch on some of the history of these private road maintenance programs through the county.
You guys want us, you guys okay with questions during
Or at
this?
the end, whatever works.
All right, go ahead.
So flip back to that other screen real quick, back one. So you're saying that any road built after July 23rd, 59 has to be a private road?
No, they would have been dedicated to a road district of some kind, whether it's a township, municipality, or county. They were, after the Plat Act, that road had to be dedicated to a particular government entity for maintenance.
Okay, so let me rephrase what I'm saying. So after July 23rd, 1959, there was no such thing as a private road anymore?
For the most part, yes. And I say that because there's kind of this phasing time. In 1959, people couldn't pick up an email or get a lot of information distributed immediately. So there is a phasing in from subdivisions that happened over the next few years, but it finally got caught up through the surveyors throughout the state that this is what was happening. The municipalities and the counties that were approving these subdivisions finally got everything, their wheels in motion. So there is kind of a buffer period that would have happened in there, but the Plat Act kicked in then requiring public ownership of roads.
Good, thank you.
Thank you, Darrell. The McHenry County DOT has had an extensive history with private roads since the 1979 state law allowed for MFT funds to be spent on private roads. Our first involvement began in 1981, and over the last several decades, several programs have been established, with the NSR maintenance program being the only active one since 2013. Note, the NSR maintenance program has always been an optional program that the county participates in and is not required. This is not to be confused with the NSR construction program, which has been completed and was terminated in 2022 upon completion. The next several slides will go over more details on the NSR maintenance program. Between 2013 and 2019, the county's allocation of state MFT contribution was fairly consistent and would match the township's eligible MFT contribution to the program each year, generally being around $182,000 annually. However, on average, only around 15 to 30% of those funds would be spent on eligible items, which includes patching, grading, ditching, tree trimming, and snow removal, as a few examples. And as you can see, in 2019, only $46,000 of that $182,000 was spent that year, roughly about 25% of the available program funds. In 2020, however, the state's increase in MFT fund came about in the final quarter of the year, thus resulting in the increase in the contributions by the township and the county into the program. And by 2021, the county's contribution has been at its highest amount, with the MFT increase in full effect. And so with this last program year completed in 2023, you will see $350,000 of county funds were appropriated, but still only $56,000 expended, just a mere 16% of the available program funds. Over the years, we have seen actual use to be consistently around 15 to 30% of the resolution amount every year. It should be noted that the maintenance program has only 5 of the 17 townships participating. It should also be noted that this is tax dollars being directed towards a very small number of residents and away from projects that serve the general public.
So when you say matching, are we talking dollar for dollar?
Dollar for dollar.
Okay.
Each program year, the same general steps occur to get to program execution. In early February, DOT staff put together and send out a program package to each of the 5 highway commissioners, which includes everything needed to work hand in hand with the residents in these private roads to put together the year's plan. The plan is worked on in March and April between the highway commissioner and their residents, outlining the work the residents wish to have performed and how much the highway commissioner is willing and able to give a given program year. The township works hand in hand with the DOT staff during this to make sure all scope meets program guidelines and MFT eligibility. And once put together, the road district returns the forms to the DOT. We review everything, and once everything is in order, DOT staff appropriates the exact amount of funds needed for the program year, puts together a resolution, and this resolution is approved by the county board. Lastly, purchase authorizations are signed by both the highway commissioner and DOT staff, authorizing each of the work type performed within every subdivision eligible on a given year. No work is allowed to start until these signed purchase authorizations have been distributed by the road district to the residents. State law was changed in 2023 that requires municipalities to notify townships of annexed property, which includes municipalities taking jurisdiction of the roads upon annexation. Prior to that, not all road districts knew of a municipal annexation or other changes to their road mileage. The DOT relied on the road districts for submitting eligible private roads into the NSR maintenance program each year, as that is the responsibility on the road district. These roads generally were not shown on the township's MFT mileage report, which gets distributed by IDOT several times throughout the year, in which the county has the township verify the accuracy of the report on a regular basis. Next, Darrell is going to talk about the recent changes to the NSR maintenance program.
Thank you, Jeremy. So what has changed? As Jeremy noted, in the 2023, the state law changed regarding township roads and the annexations. And in 2023, McHenry County DOT asked the highway commissioners to start checking their IDOT MFT mileage reports a little more closely. The highway commissioners noticed some inconsistencies while verifying their information, so then they reached out to the DOT and asked for some assistance. And our research into some of those issues spilled into the private roads as we were finding inconsistencies and some overlap in that information as well. So when we were going through this year's program, there was almost 23 miles of private roads that were submitted. After the research, DOT found that only 10.5 miles were actually private. There was nearly 4 miles that were municipal roads that were submitted as private roads to be part of the program. That means that they were already annexed by municipality and hadn't been actually realized for that. Kind of the reason why the state law was changed. There was almost 6.5 miles that should have been actually already township. And over 2 miles of roads that were really none of these categories. Some were just driveways crossing individual parcels that really weren't even platted to be a road of any kind. That gets even more complicated, but we'll keep from getting into that. So through the county's research, we found roads that were annexed that should have been municipal. We found township roads that should have been private. We found private roads that should have been township. And all of these determinations, going through the analysis, these were done administratively and at the staff level. What else changed? So this year in 2024's program, the county asked the road districts to certify that the roads that were submitted were indeed private roads. And we did this through various types of communications. And when we found our results based on the roads that were submitted, DOT also notified back to the road districts the changes in this road eligibility. And as has been in the case for the entirety of the private road maintenance program back to 2013, the road district highway commissioner is the intended individual to disseminate this information to the subdivisions and share that information back and forth. So the flow of information is typically subdivisions to the highway commissioners to the DOT, DOT, highway commissioners down to the subdivision. Yes, sir.
Go ahead, Mike.
So when you're saying you're doing all of this communication, are you speaking to all 17 townships or just the 5 that were participating?
Just the 5 that are participating.
Okay. And there was no communication to the other 12, just because they weren't participating originally?
That is correct. Historically, they have not participated in this program.
Okay. All right. Can you tell me what those 5 are?
Sure, Algonquin, Dorr, Greenwood, McHenry, and Nunda.
What was the date that you sent out the road district grants to certify those submitted, those dates on those letters?
We have some examples
You said
here.
it at the
Yeah,
front, but I
in the
forgot.
front end, we
Was
did.
that in 2020 you said, or?
No, we started here in 2024. With this
2024 you
year's
started
program.
doing the certification of,
Correct.
in 2024?
Yes.
So it so the 10.5 miles that you are saying are only in these 5 townships?
That's correct.
That's correct.
And do you know, are there quote unquote private roads in the other 12 that just have never been addressed?
There likely could be.
Okay. But the other 12 townships are dealing with that
Or not.
or not?
Or they're left to the private residents that live on those roads.
But it's not come up, I guess. We at the county have not had to deal with the other 12.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Sager.
Could you clarify the time frame here for me, please? I think you stated earlier that in February, early February, the packets were sent out to the township supervisors.
Correct,
And then we did the analysis after receiving the verification, the forms were returned? Is that right?
Yeah, so February, like you said, we send out the packet, and we'd use that time frame because we know the prior year's MFT allotment in its full amount, so we know how much they're eligible to use on the program. So then, yeah, we give the highway commissioner and their residents 2 months or so, 2 to 3 months to put together line items, work with their residents on what they want to do for a given year, and then we give a month after that for us to work out any changes, clarifications, or get the final document signed for them.
So we're now at April, or less, correct?
Well, get it out in February, give them through end of April to get us the forms, and then we use April and May as buffer time if there's any delay in receiving them, or if there's any changes because it's not MFT eligible, or there's, a need for change on their end of it.
And that end of April timeframe, that's when we know which subdivisions the highway commissioner wants to propose forward.
Right.
Because in the end, this is a matching program. The county's dollars match if the highway commissioners use their MFT to assist in the private roads. So if they choose not to put their MFT towards a private road, we don't match, we don't participate. So that's why the highway commissioners, they are key element in from the subdivisions to the county. Because if they say, no, I'm not funding this, I've got other needs, then those subdivisions never even make it to us.
Thank you.
So what has not changed in the 2024 program? Key item is that the county still can only spend state MFT funds under this private road maintenance program when a road meets 3 key items. A, the road segment is an eligible private road. Number 2, it is matched by the road district's MFT funds. That's what I just touched on, is the county doesn't pay if the highway commissioner doesn't pay. And also if the subdivision has to provide a match in kind or cash contribution. So to define what a match in kind contribution is, that's when there's an assigned value to a subdivision's equivalent labor effort that they would do on their road, and we give a dollar value to it. The state law allows for that. So we apply that dollar amount. That's why it's a match of their dollar effort at the subdivision level to what the township MFT will compensate to match the subdivision, and then the county provides the match to the township MFT. That's the, call it the 3-headed monster here to help fund the private roads through this program. Where are we now? As of the 2024 program, we have 18 subdivisions that are in the program, roughly 10.5 miles of private roads. And we're anticipating $145,000 of the county state MFT to go towards this year's program. So you'll note that this number, 145, is a lot higher than what Jeremy was talking about earlier in the presentation about what is typically annual. And so to cover what that change is here, there is a subdivision that has been planning a private subdivision for a large resurfacing program and is roughly a $400,000 project. Of that, the subdivision is putting in $200,000 of their money, roughly $100,000 from the township and $100,000 from the county. So that's what's bumped up this 1 year, is because of one subdivision that is planned for this event and is looking forward to using this program. So a couple key takeaways before we wrap this up. On this private road maintenance program, it is an optional program for the county and the road districts. There's state law that structures what happens if you choose to participate, but this is an optional program. And number two, the changes implemented this year by the DOT are to ensure that state laws are being followed for the use of state MFT funds on private roads. And with that, we can take any other questions. Thank you.
Mr. Kaminsky.
What do you consider state motor fuel money versus our county tax that we pay for McHenry County?
Well, when it comes to the different funding sources that the county receives, one is direct state MFT. That's a formula per the county. That comes straight from the state. We also have county option MFT. That may be the other one that you're referring to. And then we have RTA sales tax. We have a variety of road transportation funding sources. State MFT, straight from the state, that's what's governed by the state statute that allows road districts to put some of that, their state MFT, towards a private road and allows the county to match that state MFT.
What do we at the county for our money that is being generated in the county for the tax that we have on it? Forget the state, what can we do at the county to use that money then?
I mean, that can be a directive by the board. Right now, the county program that was passed and approved by the board allocates state MFT to follow the state law that governs that fund source.
As an option to help out some of the private roads.
Anybody else?
I'd just like to go back to this timeline, and I apologize, I don't want to grind this into the ground, but so we understand then that basically the county has April and May, as you call that, kind of a buffer period of time, because there might be some submissions that are delayed, or we are also evaluating those to ensure eligibility. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right, so we know that then by the end of May, and then it is the end of May that we notify then back to the township about this eligibility. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so it was in May then of this year that in fact we notified the township supervisors of the eligibility or those quote unquote approved or accepted according to that analysis, correct?
That's correct.
All right, and so then the township supervisor had the opportunity or the responsibility to communicate that to subdivision individuals, correct?
That's correct.
The supervisor or the highway?
Highway
Commissioner. Okay, the highway commissioner. Okay, and so then communications would have been in June, basically, to the highway commissioner, and the highway commissioner then to communicate to the residents. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So to Ms. Friend's point then, they had participated in some preparation work prior to that time. They received notification then in early part of June that their status had changed, basically, in that particular situation. I know you don't want to get into individual things, but I'm addressing the question that was raised on the floor before. And so it was in June that that notification went out.
That notification for McHenry Township went out on June 18th of this year.
June 18th.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Was that a surprise to McHenry Township? I
That was
mean,
the authorization.
Authorization.
But before that,
Yeah, the signed purchase authorizations went out on June 18th.
Correct.
That was confirmation of their program for this year.
but the notification that roads were in or out was earlier.
Yeah, it was the normal timeframe.
Which was,
April, May, I mean, we have specific timelines. We sent out the package that year, end of February, and then McHenry Township submitted some initial forms back in mid-April. And between mid-April and mid-May, we notified them of which ones were and were not eligible. So there was kind of a holding period on how they chose to move forward with that and make revisions to their program. And then ultimately, it took until June 18th before we came to a program for the private roads in McHenry Township.
Then I have a couple of other follow-up questions. And I think you stated clearly at the beginning of your presentation that the process of communication is between the Department of Transportation, the Township Highway Commissioner, or the Township Supervisor?
The Highway Commissioner.
Okay, the Highway Commissioner. And then Highway Commissioners are responsible for communicating to their local subdivisions that may have requests to be a part of this program or have done so in the past, right?
Yep, you're correct.
Okay, and then any questions would be forwarded back to the Highway Commissioner and then from the Highway Commissioner back to the county, correct?
Correct.
And so it is not tradition, it is not, in fact, it's not even policy for the county to directly interact with subdivisions. Is that correct?
That's not tradition, yeah.
Okay. So that kind of takes care of that portion of the question. The other question I had would be historic in nature. So between the time that we started this program, which was when, 2013, is that right?
Yeah.
We instituted this program as a county in 2013.
Yes.
Okay, so from that particular time until 24, so the past 11 years, we have accepted the verification according to the forms that was provided by the Highway Road Commissioner, Township Road Commissioners. Is that correct? We've
Not entirely, because there wasn't a verification on those forms.
Right.
Okay, could you clarify that for me, please?
In other words, there wasn't a verification, they just submitted that, so.
They submitted a request, basically. Okay,
So they're not verifying at that time that those roads were eligible.
okay.
They're historical.
Right. And so we then accepted that as those roadways being eligible if they were submitted by the township road commissioners, highway commissioners. Is that right?
That's correct. We relied on the road districts and the subdivisions that the roads were private. It wasn't until we started to find these inconsistencies, assisting other road districts in finding municipal roads on their township rolls, saying, well, what else isn't exactly quite right? That these inconsistencies spilled into additional research, which then started to get connected into the private roads as well.
Okay, so that analysis then was introduced into our process then this year.
That is correct.
It wasn't done prior to that time.
That is correct.
All right. And when we identified those inconsistencies, then you pared it down and notification went out relatively quickly upon that analysis and determination.
With the roads that we knew in past, yes, there was some research that was happening earlier this year, but then we also needed to wait for the road districts to submit which roads they wanted to be a part of the program. Because again, they are the gatekeepers to what roads come through based on the funding that they're willing to allocate.
Right.
We're not going out studying every possible subdivision, every possible private road to see if it's eligible or not. We're only screening so that the roads that are presented at the time are indeed eligible, so that we are following and ensuring that the state law is being applied correctly, and the state MFT funds are being applied the way the state law intends.
Okay, thank you.
And a key point on that is that we can't allocate any funds to any work that has been completed or begun prior to getting approval.
That was one of Jeremy's also points, Tom, yes, is where the work has to happen after an authorization.
So anything done prior to that, we can't authorize.
Mr. Scala?
So just so that, based on what you just said, when, at the beginning of this year, you said 23 miles were submitted, and you determined that only 10 and a half of those 23 were actually eligible.
Correct.
So out of the 5 participating townships, that was only what was submitted this year, implying that there's more than likely a lot more than 10 and a half miles in these 5 townships that are truly private.
I suppose the word "a lot" could be debated, but are there more? There certainly are more that aren't coming forward to utilize this program.
Well, just so that I guess for myself and for the committee, a scope, you're talking about 23 were submitted, 10 and a half were actual.
Eligible.
And, you know, it theoretically, you're talking about a lot more potential in these 5 townships that are participating, and then you have other townships that haven't participated that potentially could participate. I mean, there's nothing stopping any of the other ones from participating in the program from year to year.
I don't believe so. There's nothing else that would hinder someone else from coming into the program if they knew or wanted.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't Grafton a part of this at some point in time?
Yeah, they're a good example where they have private roads within the township.
Right.
We sent them documents every year for many years to apply, and then there was never any interest to move forward.
And that's fine.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to force anyone. I'm just saying that, you know, so.
Yeah. There are others, but again, it's the highway commissioner that's the end gatekeeper. Do they have funds available that they want to allocate to private roads? Do they have funds available for beyond their own means of maintaining their own roads that they want to work towards on the private road side? That's up to them. We don't force people to participate. We don't force them to spend money. We just have a program that's eligible for those that are interested.
Okay. My last question is, so when we determined out of the 23, 10.5 were valid, I'm assuming that Tom or someone did that research to try and determine all that. And all that data and information was then handed off to the townships as the proof, I'll say, whatever. And what happened to the 12.5 miles then? I mean, has that been resolved, or is there disputes going on with that still? I'm assuming the townships didn't suddenly go, oh yeah, sure, sorry, or I'm sure there was probably some disagreements perhaps?
Well, you're dealing with the municipalities also in there.
Correct.
4.5, because that was one of my questions.
Yeah.
So 4.5 miles, and the question is, where have the municipalities accepted these roads, and have the townships accepted the 6.5 miles?
If I could speak to that from a township's perspective, if you don't mind, I don't want to jump in, but.
I'll go ahead on the township.
Jim Condon, McHenry Township Highway Commissioner. I'm not much of a gatekeeper apparently. To set the record straight, we first got notified on some roads that the township or the county was saying were private, or not private, they were public. And based on that, we've had several meetings with staff and with the state's attorney's office to try to verify what is or what isn't. It's the township's position that in order, and from what we understand from our attorney, I'm just a dumb engineer, not an attorney, but there's 2 criteria that are needed to be a public road. One, it has to be dedicated. The second, it has to be accepted. And these roads that we had, whatever, at one point, 20-some miles, whatever, we're down to 5 or so. But there's no evidence that those roads were ever accepted into the township. That's why we continue to claim that they're private roads. And that the county, when we discuss this with the county and Tom, we've never gotten the feedback saying, no, here's the reason why the county says. We met with you, and to the best of my knowledge, I've never heard back why we're wrong. And if your position is, well, we just say you're wrong, and if you don't like our opinion, then take us to court. And maybe that's the avenue. I don't know, but we never heard why, when the state statute says it needs to be dedicated and it needs to be accepted, and we have no evidence of those roads being accepted, why wouldn't we continue to say that they're private roads? Nobody's given us that feedback. The other thing that I just want to touch base on is there's some time frames, and I didn't bring the paperwork with me, about when we were notified which subdivisions were and were not included, which private sections. We can go back, and it goes a little bit back to, we never heard back on our argument, I don't want to call it argument, our opinion that these were still private roads, and we never got feedback saying they're not, other than at the end. When did we receive that? You said June 18th? We had the final determination, you are not in for many of the roads. And that's why some of the more organized associations spent that money, because it was just a common thing. That's a routine that's been going on for 20 years, okay? There's a couple other things, if I can have a couple more minutes, just to touch base on, but that was the dedicated, non-dedicated. The townships do not agree, or at least McHenry Township, speaking from McHenry Township, we do not agree that those are public roads, because there's no evidence that they've ever been accepted, okay? So, and there's a couple other points, if you want me to go through them, I'd be glad to. But on that particular issue, the township does not agree that they are public roads. As a perfect example, I'll give you one simple example. We have Nippersink subdivision. It's in the very northeast corner of McHenry Township. It's got a mile or 2 miles of road, and I don't remember. But it was developed in 7 different phases. In each phase, it says private road on the final plat. Until you get to the very last phase, which is phase 7, which the road that they dedicated is from that wall to that wall. And they didn't put on there private road. The county has determined based on that one statement, even though the previous 6 phases say private road, that one strip in the back of the subdivision, which has a little cul-de-sac, is now a public road, because it didn't say that. I don't think that was the intent of it. It doesn't seem to make sense to me. It's just common sense. But you're using that, you're picking things to be able to say they're public roads, just to take them out. From my perspective, that's the way it looks to me. And I don't think that's what we should do as government agencies. Our role at McHenry Township is to try to get the last 5 miles of roads upgraded. You talked about the construction program and it ending in 2022, I believe it was. I remember the chairman being at a meeting when we were going through this whole process, and you had said at the time, if I recall correctly, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's what I recall, is we hope to continue this to take care of the rest of them so that we're done and all the roads are private. So that takes me to the next point of some of these non-dedicated roads not spending the money they're going to spend, because many of them, and I have them listed here, actually applied to get into the program. But they weren't, the program wasn't extended. That's why they didn't use more, or we didn't allow more of the MFT funds, because we thought that we had these extra, the next 5 miles that we were going to continue with the program to try to bring them in. So to address your comment that only part of the funds were used, because we were sitting back waiting and anticipating these programs being brought in. Because as I've said many times, the way the program came about was based on a survey and the utilization of that survey, and we can cover that 1,000 times.
Okay, we're gonna get in the woods here on a different program. I'll say one thing on that program though. That program was ended at that time, and in our meetings, we discussed the board did not have the appetite to continue that position. So I'll leave that at that right there, on that.
Yeah.
So Teresa, did you want to join us? I know a couple
thank you.
board members are
I
here.
do.
If you want to join
thank
us,
you. Yeah,
I'll let you guys ask a couple questions if you want to.
So I'll be like the staff when they're very professional. I'm Teresa Mashas from District 1. So I came to know about this program a little over 2 months ago when somebody from Algonquin Township and Fox River Grove in particular called me saying they didn't know why they were kicked out of this program, or they didn't even know they were kicked out. They said there's confusion about the program, and they were hoping I could educate them on what the county's doing for the program, and I, of course, didn't know anything about it. So I reached out, probably incorrectly, to Scott, and how Scott became my go-to guy in the transportation department. But Scott got the information from Daryl, who then told me much of what Daryl just said to us today. And the problem that the Fox River Grove subdivision had was it was late August, early September, and they had not known that it was a definite no for them. So they were under the impression that it could be still decided, that there was a time period where they could debate, was their road actually private, or at the time the county had determined it was a township road, which they would accept that. But as Mr. Conninger said, Daniela Sandberg is also here. She's our Algonquin Highway Commissioner. She had said, you have to be dedicated and you have to be, the other thing you just said. Accepted. And so I also met with Ms. Sandberg, who very much said similar things to what Mr. Conninger said, which is they weren't accepted, they weren't dedicated, and they needed time to be able to debate the new assessments. I looked it up. On December 12th, I emailed both Jim is the chair of transportation and Mike is the chair of finance, saying, I understand that these subdivisions that were not accepted in the program because they're deemed not private are kind of in the lurch right now. And I was wondering if there could be a stopgap for 1 year to cover these programs, which is about, I think, probably around $40,000. And my sense of where would we get that money from is using, this is kind of a false save here, the interest dollars from ARPA. So we have these interest dollars, right, that we can use for what we want because they're interest, right? And I thought, well, it gives them 1 year to be able to determine, to go talk to the townships and the municipalities to say, are you going to accept us? And are you now going to take over our maintenance? Because in the grand scheme of things, like the amount of money that they're not going to get funded through MFT is a smaller portion than other programs we do fund, and they're just left with not knowing how they're going to get programs done for this year. But I think a year gives them enough time to then go debate that with the municipalities and the townships.
Okay.
And I also,
Matt said, I don't know about ARPA funds, I don't think you could use those because you don't have matching MFT funds. You can't do that. That would be a crossover.
Not under this program.
but not this program, right? I'm saying it's not this program.
I think she's suggesting allocate other funds from some other source.
Right, just for a year. And I'm not even sure, I mean, we could ask, but I'm not sure all of the Algonquin private road they even know that they have been denied from the program. And September 12th, my understanding was they didn't know. They didn't know yet.
Is that our problem when
It's not our problem.
Is that our problem if the road commissioner is supposed to communicate that? Did I hear that?
Right. I mean, I agree, it's not the county board's problem.
I'm not saying it's not a problem. I'm
Right.
just saying that would be
That was where the breakdown was.
yeah.
Just real quickly, how are we ever notified if the other entity accepts the road? Right? Is the county notified somehow that the municipality or the township did accept that road? Do we have any documentation? What is that process, I guess is my question. And I forgot, Pam Altough, District 6.
Could I comment on that? Because those two statutes, or those, that procedure that that Mr. Condon articulated, those are inapplicable to this program. So there doesn't need to be an acceptance, but that's a whole point of law that
That wasn't a township road.
if that wants to be determined by a court of law, that's another thing altogether. And it's an administrative decision on who participates. And also, as far as Mr. Condon is concerned, we had meetings back in March, and I presented those two statutes to his attorney at that time, and so clarify that. And also, Mr. Condon confused private and public a couple times during his presentation, where I think he meant to say they become public, whereas he said they become private. So there was a little confusion in that, in the use of the terms private and public during what he said as well. So I just want to clarify that the procedure that he's articulating is inapplicable to this program.
The use of motor fuel tax dollars for them.
Right, the acceptance of the township road commissioner and municipality and all that. That's a separate issue. It's outside of the motor vehicle tax.
Mr. Reiner first, and then Mr. Sager next.
So, as a road commissioner, and I don't mean to disparage anyone, any road commissioner, they should know these items, right? I mean, you know, the motor fuel tax and the rules of sharing the tax dollars, private versus non-dedicated before they are dedicated and turned into public. This isn't new to a road commissioner, right? These programs, these specifications or requirements to get all these tax or shared dollars. If I were a road commissioner for 30 years, I would know what the program is and what's required, wouldn't I? And I don't mean to disparage Mr. Condon or Danielle, anybody, but I mean, is this new?
This particular program, everything followed from beginning to end has been consistently the same for the last 10 years. It was just the addition of the verification form, which just added the additional time.
So if I were in a township and I lived on a non-dedicated private road that had not been dedicated or accepted to become public, who would I go to? Would I go to the county or would I go to the township road commissioner to get dedicated? And who would foster me to get my private road public?
You would start with your highway commissioner. And then if the highway commissioner agreed to move forward, then they would work with the county.
Back in 2000, what was it, 18, when we turned these roads and gave all that money out to get these roads public, when was that, 2018?
That started back in 2015 when that all came about.
And I think it started in, wasn't it Nick Provenzano in McHenry Township to get all these roads?
It's a different program, that's not the maintenance program.
Okay, to get the private roads into public though, to square this up, to get these roads out of this designation, didn't we address this?
So a highway commissioner can accept a road on their own if it meets their own criteria. They can choose.
Yeah.
There is a state process that they have to have everybody on the road agree to convert from private to public, and there's a variety of other steps. There's a step in a process that a highway commissioner and a subdivision could go through to convert from private to public. That doesn't need this program. There's also an avenue that a subdivision could choose to be annexed if they were neighboring a municipal boundary and apply that. Then those roads don't remain private, they become public and responsibility of that municipality. And maybe the municipality will dump off maintenance on them, but really, if a municipality annexes, it becomes their road to deal with. So those are other ways that they can move from private to public. The steps are out there. They aren't done all that often, but there are steps out there.
So I'm going to jump in here before I let the other two ask question, just off of John's question. The municipality roads, when they annexed roads, and this came up as a subject in the past, that discussion when they annex in a subdivision, there was a dispute before that they didn't annex in the roads. They left the roads out.
There was a period of time when a parcel or a group of land was annexed by a municipality and they would stop at the edge of the road. State laws changed. They have to annex to the far side of the road so they control it.
But they don't.
That's between a variety of different agencies, whether it's a township or a municipality, and some work together, some have maintenance agreements. If it's a county road that's split between incorporated or not, it's still ours. If it's a state road that's split between an incorporated or not, it's still a state road. Same goes for interstate.
No, when you have a municipality that, became Johnsburg's a good example, became a town, the roads that were non-dedicated private roads, sorry pal, unless you want to pull your money together and come into the city, that still remains a private road. And we actually lost out on the MFT funds because state law says if it's a municipality, you get none.
But I'm sorry to open this can of worms, but the new state law in 23 says they have to.
The state law in 23 that we referenced in this program was a change in how notifications were made. The municipality could annex a township property and or road to the far side. That was already enacted. But they wouldn't have to tell anybody. They could do it on their own. And then the highway commissioners could still keep plowing, think it was theirs, but it's been grabbed by the municipality. And
So that
I don't know if it was ever done out of spite,
dispute
it's
is
just
the
not
municipalities and the township and the non-dedicated. That dispute then becomes that. That's nothing to do with us here at this point.
Correct.
And that's what I wanted to clarify. Not a long way around. Okay. Mr. Say.
I want to truly be respectful and do not want to point fingers or be disparaging to any individual or entity here, but I think that we can all see that over the course of time here, requirements have changed and therefore implications have changed. And I think that it's resulted in some miscommunication, misunderstandings, and I'm going to bluntly say in some instances mistakes. I think that there was an expectation on individuals' parts that if it was private, therefore a period of time, they had an opportunity to participate in the program. But I also would say that there were expectations, I think, on behalf of the county that if the township highway commissioner said or supervisor said that in fact, this is a private road and it's therefore eligible, that we didn't have either the time, the manpower, the expertise, whatever it was, to double check that. And so for a period of years, that was just accepted. We now have the expertise or the capacity to double check that, and we found some discrepancies here. So I think, there's all kinds of things that are there, and I don't know that we can go through and really solve all those things except to kind of start a bit with a fresh slate. I'm going to say personally, and this is not going to go over well with individuals, but I think the reality is that when we began as a county to accept private roads and provide assistance for private roads, we opened a Pandora's box. Municipalities don't do this. In a municipality, if it's a private road, there are benefits that are derived by designation as private. And that is at the onset in construction. You don't have to build roads to the same standards. 1, in many instances, you don't have to have curb and gutters. 2, another one, you frequently don't have to have sidewalks. All those are part, if they are public roads, of the requirements for construction. And if you decide that you want to be a private subdivision, you can be a private subdivision, and there are benefits derived predominantly in the reduced cost of construction or improvement, and that is passed on to the consumer in the price of those homes. So I personally believe we need to end this program. I don't think that it is worth the challenges associated with it, and I also will say that I'm not sure that taxpayers should be responsible for providing for private roadways. So that's a philosophical position that I think we have to address. My hope would be that the program is terminated, and I would be in favor of terminating this program beginning with this next fiscal year. And so I would like to see this body say that we want to have staff reports and we want to have an effort that would lead to a recommendation to the full board that in January, decision were to be made to terminate this particular program. Now, that's over here. The issue with regards to this current year is still, in my mind, up in the air. I understand our perception as a county of the communication trail. I understand that. I don't think that it is illogical, though, for residents to think that they should have had communication a little bit earlier. Maybe they should. Whether that rests on the township highway commissioner or whether that's on the county, I'm not going to get into all that because you can go back and forth and point the fingers and that doesn't help anybody. But I do believe, to colleague Teresa's point, that we need to see if there was a way that we can make this whole. Now, from a legal perspective, on one hand, it's going to say, if the county determines that these are non-eligible, then we can't use those state funds to do that. And it would be totally inappropriate for us to do that. We can't do that. So at this point, there's nothing we can do with MFT funds in this particular situation to make, quote unquote, people whole under this year's program. But I do think that there's an opportunity and the money is, it's not minimal. I don't think any money is minimal, but in the larger picture, I think it's workable. And I think, to me, that's where we need to start, is to look to see what the options are. Bottom line, we can't use MFT funds. Bottom line. We know now we can't do it. Getting back to the question about whether they have been accepted by another unit of government or not, I highly question that. I just don't think that that is the position. So I'm concerned about that. I do think we need to clean that up, but I don't think that's a part. But to me, we need to divest ourselves of this program. So I know that's going to be unpopular, but that's my position.
One question, probably for state's attorney, is if the county were to come up with a different, as Ms. Mesh's source of funding, the townships couldn't use their MFT funds either. Because they have to be matching, don't they?
I believe they
Under
could
this
use
program?
their MFT funds independently of us, and I did, based on.
You're shaking your head, no.
No, if the road isn't private, they can't use their MFT on a non-eligible private road. They have other fund sources too.
Yeah.
They'd have to use their other funds. That's what my question
That's
is. Okay. All right.
And then the other thing I just would like to emphasize again, I know we've made that point several times, but this is an administrative decision back when this originally program came into effect. They gave that decision to the county engineer to make the decision. We don't have to participate in this program. We willingly participate in this program based on our criteria.
If there is a dispute, who's the arbiter?
Right, that would be up to the highway, that would be up to the county engineer to determine whether or not these roads are eligible or eligible for funding.
Ms. Althoff?
Can just because I'm not following, we keep referencing two separate programs.
Right.
One is the state program where we can use state MFT dollars for these roads. The other is the program the county willingly put into place way back in 2015, correct? Those are the two programs we're talking about.
Well, no, the 2013 NSR maintenance program right here, that policy and structure is built using state MFT funds that are distributed to the county that then is appropriated through that program for private road maintenance. So you're correct at the fund source and this program, but they're not two different things.
And
I got it.
And the other confusion might have come up on the construction program was the other program that we were
Right.
referring to.
Got it.
So those were two different.
Thank you.
Carl?
Expand upon Mrs. Mesh, talking about the interest from the ARPA funds. And I brought up the question, you have state MFT fund, and we have our county tax, gas tax. And couldn't the townships in essence do the same thing? Separate the two? We use in addition to the interest on the ARPA funds to help out the townships to your point that they can't touch that, but have other motor fuel money and some revenue to, start. And the last question I had, back in the day, we submit the forms, we were able to get material, be it chip rock or, gravel or whatever. It was our responsibility to, use that on our roads. Whatever, is that fund gone?
I'm not following
Back
the
in the
last
day, on a
part.
private road, we can submit it to the township to get a portion of the motor fuel within that township.
Sure, that's probably
And
their
for
own.
material to fix roads. If you became a municipality, well, sorry, that ain't happening no more.
Yeah, that's the same program. That same state law that kicked in 1979 said MFT could be used on private roads. And there's further statutes that Tom knows the numbers of, but are sort of irrelevant at this point, that says townships can use their MFT provided the road, the subdivision matches. And whether that's money or that in-kind match.
Labor.
They have to equal each other. So that's most likely the example you had from back in the day, that we're participating with a township in order to get some chip rock or whatever. There's their state MFT allocated to that township with a subdivision match. We got some rock on the street.
Mr. Sager?
I want to go to some bottom line questions with regards to actual cost. The 10.5 miles that you feel are eligible for this program, what's the cost of that going to be?
We expect $145,000.
$145,000. And so if we were to look at quote unquote, I'm going to call these disputed funds. I don't know that that's a good terminology to use, but we're looking at the disputed, what's the amount of money that we would add to this?
So of the 23 miles submitted, 10.5 equals that's 145. We haven't, I don't think, Jeremy, we have any authorizations or work orders or things of that from the highway commissioners and the subdivisions, what they want to do on those. What was the work proposed on those other 10 and 12 miles? But historically speaking, maybe it's another $20,000 or $50,000. I mean, that's how much would be spent year over year.
But note, the same amount of money could be used with these 10.5 miles versus what it was in the past. That money doesn't go away, it just gets reallocated.
Right.
Accordingly.
So your estimate, though, is $20,000 to $50,000 more. Top line.
That would be the county's contribution, which would equal some subdivision match, as well as a dollar for dollar match to the county from a road district. That would have to come out of the way we're discussing it, out of a different fund for a, whatever you guys chose, a 1-year gap or something.
I respect everyone's concerns here. I think that we have a degree of obligation to move forward with a program in this fiscal year. We already have budgeted funds. I think we have an obligation to do that. However, I think we have to be cognizant of our restrictions relative to the law, and I trust that everyone in the audience can understand that we have to follow certain guidelines that are imposed upon us by the state. And so I think we want to do that. And if we are knowledgeable or have come to the conclusion, as indicated by the State's Attorney's Office, is an administrative decision that certain roads are eligible and certain are not, then we have an obligation to follow that under state law. So I think that we need to recognize that. $145,000, that's in the budget, that can be covered. We're good with that for that 10.5 miles. The outstanding questions, I think that are there, if it's at $50,000, I think that we need to ask staff to work with us to try to identify another source for that $50,000 and try to move through the program at the end of this year. That's my opinion. I think that that would be.
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Yeah.
You're talking about the end of this year, which we don't have it on our agenda for action, just so we understand everybody. So this would have to, what you're proposing is something come to the full board as new and unfinished business. Am I understanding this correctly?
Yes.
Okay.
That's true.
Well, we have 1 month left in our fiscal year.
Exactly, so it has to happen.
Well,
And I don't know how we.
I don't know how, again, typically speaking, what is being done is patching and other stuff. I mean, most of the asphalt plants aren't even open, so I don't know how you would accomplish.
Yeah, this program is split into 2 different seasons technically. We didn't go into that. You know, winter season, so winter items start December 1st. So you're right, we're coming near the end of the season. So if it were
If it was a summer item, you would be.
You're pretty much at the end here.
Right, yeah. If it was a winter, you could probably still get away with it. If it was whatever winter, what's winter items?
Winter items run from December 1st through April 1st, and it's snow plowing and salt placement.
So the only portion basically possible is for winter, and that's gonna be minute.
Winter, you could even possibly even do tree. Sometimes some subdivisions have tree removal or tree trimming.
It's only summer for this.
Only summer for this program.
So,
Okay.
okay, now that we discussed that, continue on.
Well, the other thing is that I think that we need to determine whether or not this committee believes that it would be appropriate for us to basically terminate the program and do that with next fiscal year. So move something forward to the full board in January.
Okay. And I would say that would be, I don't have an objection to that, that would be after the reorganization of the
Right.
board. And so that would be a whole new committee at that point, dealing with that. So I don't object to that myself, moving forward in the beginning of the year and having the board discuss it and bring the whole program forward, whether we keep it or not.
You know, at least a program to say, look, either get these roads public or not. You have so much time to do this, but at some point, this has got to end.
Right.
Okay, but it's the county engineer's choice. And that road, not to put you in the hot seat.
Who would that be?
But we could, at the board, there should be an agreement that we're gonna go
I
ahead.
would say that if, maybe I'll be able to say this in January, but that if the county board in January decides to end the program, I do think it would be appropriate for the county to send out a note so that everybody, all these subdivisions know it's out, because it's I recognize in this current issue, or, you know, the statement is that the highway commissioners need to tell their people, their constituents, that they're out of the program when they were deemed not eligible. But it falls then to the people who were expecting that they're, like, we've always been funded, they just thought they were getting funded again. So what would be the staff burden to having staff send out a note to in January, assuming that the next board cancels this program? What would be the burden of staff to be able to send out those notices?
Since the program's,
I think the problem with that is that meeting in January, I'd assume we're probably gonna have it here, and, because it's gonna be a pretty big meeting, I would assume. And I don't think you'd send any notice until the board made a full decision.
No, I know, but I'm saying, I could also come back in January, even if I'm not invited. As a public.
As a resident public.
Yes.
Me too.
yeah, if that decision were to be made, thankfully, it would be very easy on our end, because we do have a designated representative from each subdivision. We have
Okay. Oh,
contact information, mailing address, so it would not be an issue from staff level.
Okay.
So it would not be an issue from staff level.
Okay.
So,
All right.
yeah,
for those subdivisions that we know of.
That we know, that are participating in this year's
We're
program.
not able to get information out to every non-dedicated subdivision road in the whole county because we don't know where a lot of those are. We don't have contact with them already, so.
Okay. We strike that up for future business. Anything else? Any other questions?
I have a question. I'm not part of the board, and I do apologize for interrupting. But are we gonna be able to respond to what you guys have just discussed? I have an opinion, and I'd like to voice that opinion, and I see a lot of stuff happening here that we have no say in the matter, and it affects us directly. So I'd like to know, is there a point in time where I'll be able to say something?
I think under our board rules, that would come under the public comment on the next meeting at this point, which would be January probably, or November, end of November.
January 3rd is the next schedule.
January 3rd.
Well, actually, November 26th is, but more than likely that would be canceled.
So at that point, you guys have already decided to end this program, and obviously those 10.5 miles are gonna just be left, put aside, and not be accounted for. Because we're affected by those 10.5 miles. And that's why we're here, and we were asked to be here. So I do respect the board, and I do understand what your job is to do by all rights. I don't want to interfere with the politics of what's going on here. But I'd like to have something to say, because it seems like you guys are making decisions for us homeowners without us having any say in that matter.
Okay, without going any further on this, I'm going to disallow any further discussion on that to our board rules. And I'll take the heat on that. I'm not going to, because what happens is you open Pandora's box of every time there's an issue, we have a big discussion at the meetings on whatever the issue is. And we've discussed this pretty heavily now. It's been well over an hour that we've had this discussion as the board rules and everything. So I guess I would rule against opening this up right now as the chair of the committee.
I would just state that to this board, if I were someone that had a private, non-dedicated, accepted road, I would speak to my county representative, though, to get your voice heard.
Absolutely.
And I'm not gonna speak
They
to
can
the
send
public,
emails
I'm
out
just
to
saying that
everybody.
to this board.
They can send emails out to the representative or anybody else
Yeah.
of us. They can send those emails. Now, those emails are gonna go to the junk email for most of the board members, and they'll have to be watching their junk emails. Or Katie can possibly forward some of those through to everybody. So, because a lot of stuff from individuals goes to
Absolutely.
junk.
Absolutely.
Mike?
I think if we're going to go down that road, that is a paradigm shift from where we have been. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I think you're impacting people based on a paradigm shift that we've been doing for over 10 years. And I think it would be foolish of the board, whoever the board is after Election Day, to make that decision unilateral without having some thought process and meetings behind it. And perhaps a transportation committee meeting is not the right venue by which to have that. And perhaps, you know, there should be a working group, or you have a transportation meeting where there can be open dialogue, so that, you know, the people that we're truly impacting can have a voice and have a discussion. And all unilaterally, it's the board's decision, right? But without having a thought process and a conversation about it, I think would be very short-sighted by the future board to look at.
I don't disagree with you on this. I totally agree with you on this, and that's an excellent idea. We can even do a special meeting on that if we choose to.
Whatever you want to do, but.
And I agree with you on that. They can speak to it, but today, I can't allow it today though, because it's not.
No, but I guess
It's
my
not
point is
appropriate
whether you pass something in January or February or March or whatever the time frame is, if you're having the communication with the people that you're impacting, they already know what's going on, and yes, it maybe will cramp the timeline depending on what the decision is, but still, you have everyone in the process, and everyone has a chance and an ability to speak and be heard, and hopefully, maybe there's something different that comes up that the board can all agree on with the residents and with the highway commissioners and staff.
Well, and I think you're right on that part, so we'll, after this year and the new January committee, they should form that and include those municipalities that these roads are in, and these 2.5 miles that are something else, I don't even know what those are, what you stated those are. But we should include that, and I don't have a problem, but then get everybody there.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially, I think that's most appropriate.
Yeah. Not just one person set affected, you have to have the municipalities. If the municipalities say, we say they have 4.5 miles, they need to be there to defend themselves. We went through this with a stoplight here last year. Remember, a stoplight?
Yeah.
Went through it, wasted a lot of people's, and then we find out that it's not even a township road. It was a privately held road. After all that time and effort and legal and financial for the school district and everybody else, and find out that we were led down a rabbit hole that didn't exist. So, no, I agree. That way we can cover every base here by doing that. And that's respect to everybody else that's involved, all stakeholders. So.
I still think that we have an unanswered question here, and that is there any participation at all in terms of the county participating with revenue from another source to assist and meet some of the requests, either because we can identify another revenue source for this $20,000 to $50,000, or is it even possible to get anything done in the season? So I'm still unclear about that.
Even if it was winter maintenance that Jeremy had talked about, that's a key item for some of these subdivisions. But it would be up to both the board here, if there's a desire to run a resolution through by November, county board, to appropriate that different fund source, as well as the road districts. Are they willing to match that with a different fund source? Because as we said earlier, they're not, the county's view of how the roads that are in or out, they're not allowed to use their own MFT on that. So we're only still part of the equation, part of the three ends of the triangle for participation.
So you're
that would call for putting some type of resolution together for the actual county board November meeting for the county board. And if this committee wishes to do that, then we got to put somebody on that.
I don't know what that would look like, though.
That's the problem, defining it.
And so it's either practically impossible, or we ask staff to put something together, right?
But if we're asking staff to put something together, what are we asking to put together?
Right.
I mean, I don't have a problem asking, staff will be happy to do whatever we ask them to, but they gotta have some direction, and I don't know what the hell that direction would be right now.
Well, so I thought that you don't have the applications that were deemed not eligible, or you, because I thought at some point you did have them.
We have the applications that are signed for all the eligible ones. It didn't, if they weren't eligible, it ended.
And you never
Right.
saw the dollar amount on them. Because, so when I went and met with Danielle Sandberg for Algonquin Township, she had a list of the ones that were rejected, and she knew a dollar amount for those rejected. My understanding also was that only McHenry Township and Algonquin Township were debating the eligibility, that the other three haven't contacted McDOT to say, we think you're wrong.
No, we've heard from all 5 of the highway commissioners, and there hasn't been any issue moving forward with the program this year, other than, hearing from Jim and
So it is just Algonquin and McHenry Township. So like, I felt like, for sure, Algonquin Township knows how much money they were hoping would be approved that wasn't because of eligibility. I'm going to assume that Jim Condon maybe has the same number for McHenry Township. What I was anticipating when I originally offered this up as a discussion item for a resolution was that we would find out those $2 amounts, and if there are any others, which you don't think there are, and put that together and say, can we designate this dollar value to covering a 1 year stopgap? And make it clear, it's 1 year. It's not happening. Like, they're not eligible, they will never be part of this program, no matter the future of this program. So they have a year to go talk to the municipalities or the townships and get themselves in order for what services they would be eligible for.
So what would a maximum fund level be that they could bring back to you, to the staff?
Well, I think.
What if they brought back $150,000? That's my question.
Historically, we've seen the $40,000 to $60,000 a year. That's summer and winter.
For everything.
That is actually expended every year. So
I think like Teresa said, the only hard data that's really out there would be looking at the original requests that came in of those dollar amounts and seeing that number from the subdivisions that were denied, and that would be your number.
Somebody's got to ask that question though,
Yeah.
because that's what's going to happen.
Because that's the real number. That's what number they were going with for that.
Can I just ask one question? You're talking about the county contributing funds. It's my understanding if the road district contributes funds, any funds other than road and bridge, which I don't know that we would have enough. There are two things. One, you already have you already have our application, so you can figure out the amount of those other roads that weren't included, just to let you know. And it's not that much. Ours is right around 50,000, so yours would be right around. And in half of that 50,000 is already in through the 10 miles. But the other part is, if we contribute any funds or we do any work on these roads, we then, I think by state statutes, we then take over those roads. Those roads are no longer private. Whether we agree or disagree, whether they're private or public, that's for another day. But if we expend funds out of our program, does that become, that's going to be our difficulty we can't use MFT funds. I'm not sure we have another.
There's another.
So what Jim is referring to is state law, and Tom and I have gone over this quite a few times. If a private road has state motor fuel tax funds applied to it for some maintenance or improvement, and it meets a minimum standard, by operation of law, that road becomes the road district's. Without any choice by the residents, or they're saying, no, we don't want it to. It becomes by operation of law a township road. That only applies to state MFT though. The state law only talks about state MFT for that. So to the point of what's being discussed here, of another fund source or road and bridge or something like that, it would not apply.
So therefore, the township road commissioner couldn't spend his MFT funds on it unless he chose to take those roads in. Unless he chooses to take those roads. If he spent his MFT funds, those roads are his.
Only though if they brought up to standard, right?
If you make 1 penny of improvements through state MFT, that's an upgrade to the road, which would then turn that road over to the township.
Okay.
So if the board in this November actually did get something in a decision, this is 24 budget funds?
Yes.
Coming out of this year's budget funds, just to clarify, make sure that this doesn't affect 25's budget. That's another. So if the board did this, the townships then would have to choose whether they could come up with the funds. If we said we're going to match it, the full board in November agreed to match this, then if the townships did not accept that right away, basically nothing happens.
I'm not understanding the whole revenue side of it, because we already have appropriated dollars that would cover whatever the hell that y'all want to do. So the dollar side doesn't need to be appropriated, it's already there. It's a functionality of what administration has done, staff has done, and us overriding it.
But we can't use MFT funds
That's the issue. It would be a different fund.
because they're not
Meeting,
meeting the state statute. Those 10.5 miles, or those 20 or 12.5 miles.
But that's contested. I understand, yeah, Tom's saying it's one thing, and everyone else, or other people are saying it's something different. And unless you have documented proof that it was accepted, because I hear what you're saying, you're shaking your head no.
Well, that is not necessary under the statute, and we've supplied that to Mr. Condon's attorney back in March. And they were talking about having a declaratory judgment action filed, so that would be the course of action there.
Okay, so, but even under that scenario.
At this point, it's the county engineer's administrative decision to what roads that they choose to match the funds with. So it's totally an elective choice, an administrative decision. And so based on that, and then also Mr. Condon had also provided the mileage that he has left in his township district road that is private, and I extrapolated that out based on the cost that he presented me, which I'm looking for in my document, per mile. And that's quite a large amount of money, and that would take a pretty long period of time. Plus, also, I think what you're looking at is a broader investigation on what private roads are left, and then you want to do some resolution related to that, totally outside of this program. That'd be totally your prerogative.
Yeah, but you just, okay, help me if I'm wrong, but you just said it's in Joe's purview to either say yes or no.
Right.
Isn't that what you just said?
Exactly.
So what is?
Based on the law.
Okay, so if at that point, MFT dollars could still be spent.
Not on non-eligible roads.
That's
By
where the
law, legally.
But that's where the
You
discrepancy
can't break the
is.
law. One way to cut that's one way to cut a salary. One way to cut a salary.
But I agree.
Isn't that part of the discrepancy?
Yeah, that's a
is-
discrepancy.
We made the decision.
Yes,
They made-
there is a discrepancy then based on that. It's like an umpire, you could say, was that a ball or a strike? Well, the umpire called it a strike, so you gotta live with that strike three. You can't say.
Unless there's video
We got
replay.
people stands that are
We
saying.
can go to New York for that.
So, I mean, the umpire has made the call, basically.
Green Bay, you'd probably take it back.
See, that's the problem with this whole thing. We run into a whole,
I don't, okay, so I really question why we're trying to ram something down and just.
you just said we can't. It's
Right.
Joe's decision.
Well, no, Joe already made the decision.
Yeah. Pam?
So can we direct, which is what I'm listening to, can we direct staff to determine what a not to exceed dollar amount would be for the program, that those people that are now currently approved and those that we said no, and then allocate a specified line item to pay for that program, which would not be motor fuel tax dollars, because we can't. And we obviously have to have some money somewhere, Mr. Finance Chair, in the budget that we can allocate and just put a not to exceed dollar amount on it, and then that will give us some time to figure out.
Utilization of fund balance would be the easiest place to utilize those
Okay,
dollars.
so-
If we're talking about $50,000, that's the point. That's not a big deal.
Well, I think we're talking about more closer to 200,000, because we can't use any of that 145 from motor fuel tax, which is where it's budgeted now, right?
No,
It will probably be 145 for the 10.5
That's
miles.
safe.
That's
safe.
done.
So we're talking
So
$50,000 max.
Let's find out what that outstanding dollar amount is and use it from,
Up to $50,000.
yes, yeah.
That's right.
That would be the
John, you had
resolution.
something to say.
Well, again, to your point, and actually, Pam, that's what I was gonna say, we could certainly find out you know, the funds to appropriate for this out of our general fund or somewhere else that's not in the motor fuel tax. But these road commissioners are gonna have to decide if they're gonna accept these roads, take our money, because if they take our money and accept these roads, that's their onus in the, but it's not our problem, but it's sooner or later, we're gonna have to end this.
That could be part of, though, the agreement that comes up, is that the county will
Just-
utilize its money from
Wait a
this
minute.
fund.
Just
Yes,
to,
but my
wait a
point
minute,
is, the road
just to
commissioners
clarify,
said they have
just
to
to
use their
clarify,
motor
they're
fuel
not
tax.
spending MFT on this. They
But
can't.
they're spending
If
their
they
money
do,
on
they
it.
have to take it in,
It's my point.
right, and, but
my
they're
point.
not spending MFT on it.
Yeah. but
That's
my
their
point.
decision.
We're
If they
not.
wanna
But
take
if
it in,
they
it's
do
their,
then
they can
they're
take it in without
accepting
spending anything on it.
Yeah.
Well, I think to clarify, the money that's being looked at is for the roads that were already determined to be township, municipal, or none of the above. So they're not even private roads that we're talking about.
Yeah.
That-
That part's separate.
Matt, we haven't heard from
Matt.
him.
God,
Yeah, I've been trying, we can't get a word in edgewise.
gotta leave my.
It has given me a higher level perspective. If I can have a word.
Absolutely, go ahead.
So really, this is a very simple issue because we have to follow the law, the state law. And all we're talking about is weaning the baby off the bottle or going cold turkey here. And we're kind of obligated to go cold turkey. Because if we find these funds and do this for these private people, where is the line drawn? I've got a long driveway too, and many other people have other driveway issues and road, what they consider roadways on their farms. How do you decide that their private road is more important than my private road? We all pay taxes. I think this has to be a cold turkey thing based on a state law that says this is what we can pay for, and Joe determined what we fit into that parameter, what we can pay for, and that's what we pay for. My opinion.
Thank you. All right. Anybody else?
This is a discussion, so we can't really have a motion.
We cannot have a
Here.
motion.
But we can have a consensus whether or not we would like staff to investigate something for us. To
In other words,
bring up as an item for action next meeting. Correct?
yes, we
So-
can. We can do it if there's a consensus.
Right.
That everyone would agree with that.
Right.
Your consensus that you're looking for is to have staff research
Funds.
that other 12 and a half miles.
Yes, with a funding source not to exceed $50,000. And also to begin the consideration on documentation for termination of the program effective next fiscal year.
And to be clear, some of these funds wouldn't be expended until next summer because they're
Right.
summer projects.
Understood.
It
So
would be winter stuff now, because the program
they could
goes
spend the
through-
money on the winter stuff if they chose.
Maybe
This is a-
reimbursement for costs incurred last summer. And
I see what
but
you
not going into.
Not going into next summer's.
Right.
Oh, so some of these 10 and a half miles or 12 and a half miles are already complete? So we
When,
did it without knowing we had funds?
I think we made it pretty clear earlier that we had no notification, that we didn't have any indication, and those associations are very much on the ball, very much on a routine, and completed that.
Okay, now, bring something forward for the next meeting. Does everybody agree with that?
which, just for me, which meeting are we referring to for?
It's gonna be January, because it can't be now.
Well, I was wondering though, the one about the summer, winter
Can't be
funds,
this fall.
is it too
You can do it in
close to
November?
finance meeting, to bring to
Oh, I have to
finance
bring it for
meeting?
November.
The finance meeting is a week from tomorrow.
Staff can do whatever is directed.
Staff can do whatever.
Under the county
You can bring it
board,
tomorrow, is what I.
under the county board, new and unfinished business, so I misunderstood you.
So what,
Under
want
the
a
new and
resolution?
unfinished business on the county board floor for November.
Yes.
Okay,
Right, so you want a resolution, I just want to summarize.
Through finance, straight to cow, new and unfinished business.
For the balance, approximately $50,000.
Not exceed.
Not just exceed, and with the clarification there that this would begin the process to terminate the private road program. And then the dollar amount for this will be utilized from utilization of fund balance from the general fund?
so I want you to make it sure that everyone is clear that 10.5 miles program is gone also then.
Well, I think that.
No,
but we
Are
can
you trying to
separate
terminate that also
No,
next year?
well, eventually, yeah.
You want to
Right.
terminate that eventually.
This 145,000
Might as well
stays,
kill it
that's
all
already
at
been
once if you're gonna
approved.
kill it.
Yeah, that's,
The 145 has already been approved. It's
we're
on-
talking about the 50,000.
Right, we're talking about the
For
50,000
fiscal year 24
for
program.
fiscal year 24 program.
A one-time
But-
county expense.
But you're not trying to kill that program.
25?
Yes.
Aren't those two different resolutions though? Because one is
They
right
could be,
now
certainly.
and one is in January.
Could be, certainly.
I think it
Do it all.
should be.
I think you can do it all
Separate?
together, but
Yeah.
You want it together, you want it separate?
Keep it separate.
You're separate, John, you're,
I separated.
I'm agnostic, I really don't care. You wanna make it two, make it two, I don't care. Either way, it'll work to
I think
me.
Peter's making the point, though.
you're pushing it to the next board.
Right.
So if you want to have your big britches on, we make a decision now and you can take the heat if you want to take the heat, which I'm okay with that. I got big shoulders.
I
Okay,
think spending the 50,000 is predicated on the termination.
so bring two, I want everybody to know the consequences of this is it's if we bring two resolutions forward, that means you're totally ending the motor fuel tax match program for the non-dedicated roads, which includes that 10.5 miles. That's
Yes, for
being
next-
funded already
for
this
next
year.
fiscal year.
For next fiscal year.
Right, for next fiscal
Okay,
year.
I just
Correct.
want everybody to understand before you say yay or nay that we're gonna do
But I
this.
think we should do a single resolution.
You can bring it forward whatever way you want to bring it. Just bring it forward for the meeting, open, new and unfinished business. So that's what we got.
We will craft a
Do we
resolution.
have consensus?
I see consensus to bring it forward. Tell me if you object to this, guys. To bring it forward, staff and county engineer bring a resolution forward on new and unfinished business for our November meeting. That would do two things. A maximum of $50,000 additional funding to add it on. And then also, and funded from another source other than MFT. And the second part of that resolution is to terminate the program totally for 25. Does everybody agree with that?
I know, and I think that should be on two separate resolutions.
Well, two resolutions, if it comes forward on two, but that's what's coming forward in November.
Because those are two separate issues.
So you have two questions on your board floor.
Yeah.
One, come up with a 50 grand matching, whatever if they're gonna present receipts for it. Okay?
And the next
And
one,
the next one is to terminate the program for 25, if they put it into two different ones.
Beginning of 25.
Beginning of 25. So that's where you're at on, okay. I wish they had come to them. Oh, go ahead.
Where's that money gonna go if we end the program? That money is still available. What are we gonna do with it?
We got a lot to do with that.
County.
We have more projects than we have money for.
With bridges and
So
everything.
those
we've been
dollars
doing.
stay in that fund and we allocate them to, if you want to do resurfacing, you can do a bridge project, you can do anything with it that meets MFT criteria.
Right. Okay, then that's the directive then. Okay.
good job, you guys.
Thank you.
I mean, I'm glad we spent the time. We didn't give everybody their answers, but Pandora's box always opens up sometimes. So, that's all I have on that subject now. So there's no need for, we got some else, staff report.
Nothing underneath staff report today.
No need for executive session. Next meeting location, November 26th. That'll be after the county board meeting.
And more than likely will be canceled.
Right.
What? Why?
Because you did it all in this meeting.
You got two different boards.
You did a whole lot.
You got two different boards.
And
You would have
move to
this
adjourn.
boarding committee.
So moved.
Mr. Sager moves to adjourn. I second that. All those in favor? Aye. We're adjourned.
Okay. And then the schedule is set.
Joe bought donuts if you guys want.